Welcome to Dr. Spotfire for July edition. It's about dive into Python data functions by Jagrata. Dr. Spotfire is about learning is not driven by answers but by questions. We post our recording on YouTube as soon as possible. They are on Tipco Spotfire account, and there is a special playlist called Dr. Spotfire, and I will post that in comment shortly. Um, I'm sorry, I know I was speaking on mute, but what I was saying is please post your questions in Q&A section, because on chat people post comments, and I am going to post comment and question get lost. As you all might have got update that Spotfire 10.10 is released, and it's next LTS after 10.3. There are these are some of the main features which was new in 10.10, and I'm going to post the link where all these features are explained a little bit more in detail. Next session will be on August 4th, and we are going to talk about exploring options for Tipco Spotfire in the cloud by Jayant. So I hope to see every one of you on that session as well. I'm going to post the registration link for this session shortly in chat as well. So without further ado, Jagrata going to talk about Python data function. Jagrata, over to you.
We're going to talk then about Python data functions. This is really part 2. The agenda today will follow along the dev cycle, first of all, for developing Python data functions and making them available. And we'll talk about the new Python service. When we last heard about Python data functions in January, Neil Kanungo talked about the new native support for Python data functions in Spotfire Analyst. This was a step forward from the previous Python data function extension, which was available on the community site. And as of 10.7, it was supported. Let me go into presentation mode here for the full effect of things. And so that was December, and his presentation was in January. Since then, in 10.8, we came out with self-service Python package management. We'll see that today. And then after that, in 10.10, just a couple of weeks ago, we came out with the Python service, the Python data function service, so that now, very parallel to what we have for typical enterprise runtime for R, for TER, we have data functions available in Python for web clients and automation services. And one of the things that we'll talk about today is that if, as is very common in any of your data functions, you're using certain Python packages, you want them to be available for web clients and automation services, or for other analyst users besides yourself, how can you do that? And we'll see that just as for TER, there's a Spotfire packaging method. So, and so the same mechanism that we use for updates and hot fixes in Spotfire, you can use to package up Python packages and have them automatically available to the other classes of users. But to start with, the new Python tools package management area, we'll see in a second, is available through a parallel kind of dialogue inside of Spotfire Analyst, which allows you to see what packages are available and which are installed. And it also indicates with the asterisk there, packages that have been deployed. We'll talk about that in detail. Also says whether upgrades are available. And so with that, let me move over to Spotfire Analyst itself. So we currently have a Spotfire analysis open. We're looking on this page at a sampling mechanism for a discrete distribution and a continuous distribution. You've probably seen this kind of thing many times. That works fine if we involve that in an operational risk calculation. We find that something happens when it tries to run it raises a notification. It says that, move this a little out of the way, we can't execute this function call because we didn't find a module named SciPy. So let's look at that dialog under the Tools menu that we talked about a moment ago, the Python Tools dialog. By the way, this is not the place where you would change the interpreter if you didn't want to use it. Neil talked about that in January, but you can copy its path to the clipboard and you can launch it from a console here. But in the Package Management tab, we'll see that the packages that are currently installed do not include SciPy. So now you could, if you wanted to, search for it in the list and install it, straight away. Give me a P. But that wouldn't allow other people to get access to it. No dash or something. But so that wouldn't allow other people to get access to it. So let's talk about how that would happen. Now, one of the things we wanted to outline today was a bit about the documentation. And there are a couple of ports of call I wanted to point out. First of all, in the Spotfire Analyst documentation, you'll find a link to this document, Python Data Functions in TIBCO Spotfire for 1010. Super useful. This one of the things that it goes through is how to create an SPK for Python packages. I'm going to indicate that briefly now. This is SPK is the file suffix for Spotfire packages. They can package up all kinds of things, like the JS Viz extension. Spotfire hotfixes are distributed through SPKs. Tear packages, same story, and now also Python packages. If you go down to that area, it walks you through it in detail. I'm going to give you the Cliff Notes version. You have to create an SPK file. And in Spotfire Server, they make a distinction between packages that are made available to the analyst client and packages that are made available to other clients like web player and automation services. So the Cliff Notes version is identify where Spotfire is installed, which for me is in this area. Identify the path to the spotfire.zip package that we distribute with the instance of Python that we also distribute. Then and this is a formula, this is just laid right out in the documentation. Then you call Python against the Spotfire SPK package, and you issue a name argument, and there's a switch which you may or may not use for compiling this, for packaging this for the analyst clients. Now, importantly, you want to identify a requirements file. Now, this argument in this is just giving the name of the SPK file the path and the name of the SPK file that will be created. But what is this requirements file? It's simply a list of the packages and versions that you want to roll up. I've got one for the analyst and one for the server. We'll see why in a second, but let's just give this a kick. I'll copy this into command window and let it run for a second. And while it's running, we'll talk about Spotfire Server. So inside of the administrative console, and now if you're on this call and you're thinking, oh, wait a minute, I just use Analyst. I don't go here. I don't need to know these details. We're going to get back to Analyst in a second. But if you're somebody who actually does administer Spotfire Server and wondering, okay, what's all this stuff about the Python service? This is for you. First of all, if you're looking at nodes and services, look in the nodes view, you will see that now there's a Python service, a card-carrying member of the set of the suite of node manager services for Spotfire Server. If you were to add it, if you were going to, add a service, install a new service, you'll see that it's now an additional capability. Great. And so inside of the Python service, you may have one or more instances of it. There's a section here called packages. And what we will do is add something to this list. The first stop in doing that is to go deployments and packages, and you'll want to deploy an SPK file. So how that happens is you must create one first. And so this is actually creating as we talk. I've already created them a little bit earlier today. Looks like we've just created the analyst one. So and we're in the process of creating the server. It's just going to recreate the same one. So let's go ahead and add those packages now and see what happens. We'll upload this first one for analysts and upload the second one for the server. Validate the area. Yes, everything is in sync, fine, and save the area. And when this saves, two things are going to happen. Let's go back over to Spotfire. We noticed that earlier when we tried to run on this page, the particular data function that we were running. Now, while that's uploading, we'll go ahead and look at the data function. Let's see, that is freak severity case, this one here. So this is the script for the data function that ran on this page. And notice that we're importing time, NumPy, pandas. Those were fine because those were in the list earlier. But when we tried to import scipy.stats, that is what raised the error. Notice, by the way, and I'll take this moment to add a couple of comments on the developer side. I'm using this construction. I'm quite honestly not sure that this will be my final answer, so to speak, but currently I'm using this if condition here to check to see whether I'm running through Spotfire or not. If not, in other words, if I'm running, let's say, in the Spider client, then this code will execute, and I use it to test the data function so that I don't have to worry about cutting and pasting bits and pieces of the data function into Spotfire. I can just copy it wholesale. And this allows me, of course, to corner case and stress test the data function, make sure that it gives the expected answers on known inputs. So back in Spotfire, we import some packages, we test the data function, but this won't run inside of the data function here. And then we're just going through and going through our business. If you have inputs to your data function that are tables, they'll come in as pandas data frames. And if you have inputs that are columns, they'll come in as pandas series, capital S series objects. And then everything else here is vanilla Python. Ultimately, I'll be creating a pandas data frame or a pandas series, or just scalar values and sending them back as the good old table column value kinds of outputs in your data function. So nothing breaks the pattern here. Let's go back again and see the script is finished. The SPK files have both updated. Back inside the administrative console, we've added these two packages right here. So if we close Spotfire Analyst and reopen, and I could be on another machine but connecting to the same instance of Spotfire Server, then we're going to get challenged coming in. It's the same challenge that you would get if you were in the middle of a hotfix or update or had loaded some other extension. But what's going on, if you view the details, is we've just created package. We've just deployed a package by that name. The version is 1.0.0. More on that in a second. But let's go ahead and install it. And back in the console, if we move to the nodes and services area, the Python service indicates that there's an update available. We've added a package. The update service button becomes available. You click it, and this is what will make that package available for web users. So by that will update. Back in Spotfire Analyst, we've got, I haven't signed my package, so I get that presented with that dialog. I trust myself, I install it. What's going on is there is a folder created just to demystify things. Back inside the modules folder, right before all the connectors. This folder has been set up. It's put in your Python path, your Python library path. It's got a site packages folder, and it's got SciPy inside it there. So when this loads back up again, we'll check the tools, and then we'll check that the data function runs, and then we'll launch it as well through the web clients. So let's go ahead and check the tools first. Python tools tells us the package management area that not only is SciPy available as an installed package, but also it has an asterisk next to it, just like the other packages that are made available automatically with the service. So that's indicating that's a managed package. And if you were to upgrade here, you should be forewarned that you'll be out of sync with version from other people using the same doing the same deployment. Opening up the example, excuse me, we should see that things, of course, should run fine on that first page, but moving off to the latter page, we should see that things succeed now. So on the first page, we sample, it should update, pulling a sample size of 20,000 from Poisson and log normal. And then over here, I think we wanted to compare a baseline model with model 3. Previously, this raised an error, but now it will run model 3 against the baseline. Give that a second to finish. That's taking too much. I'm getting impatient. There we go. And now if we were to go into the web client here and open up the same file, first of all, we want to see that the first page works because we now have a Python service. And indeed it does. Can take some samples, and then going on to the latter page here, which requires the SciPy module. We'll see that's running against the model 3. Let's just do a resample there. This it also works here. So the manifestly, the SciPy module has been deployed for the web player user. All right, let's pause for a second. And go back to the documentation. So I put together what I think are some of the best parts of documentation that you want to refer to. There are other bits inside of this first PDF file that are going to come up for you. For example, the data type mapping is really useful. So if you create, if you have a document property or a column of a certain data type inside of Spotfire, what data type do you expect to find it in Python, and vice versa. If you want to use a different interpreter, what's the location that you go to specify that? I mentioned in passing a little bit earlier, excuse me, this Spotfire.spk package, which is distributed with the instance of Python that we supply with Spotfire Analyst. Well, this package, as you probably would guess, is involved in serializing Spotfire objects into Python objects for the purpose of running your data function. We've exposed some functions in it that are described here, correspondingly, that you might not be surprised to see, which allow you to access the metadata of the objects that you send in from Spotfire inside of your data function script. So you might want to take a peek at this at some point. There's also information about, hey, I've created a graphic in Python. I want to show that in Spotfire. Very useful if you've got bespoke graphics already that you're generating. And so I encourage you to have a look through this. I love the tips and tricks stuff. More on that. If you go to Spotfire Analyst documentation, the documentation revolves around the dialogue that we've just looked at, right? The Python tools dialogue. So we've already discussed that. There is the Python service itself has its own documentation, and there's a couple of ports of call here. Of course, it repeats some information we've already mentioned, but if you are administering things, here, for example, is the versioning rules. If you were to go back into the requirements.txt that we use for analyst and server respectively, you'll see that it was written to when we ran the script. This information was written. And so if you were to rerun it and bump this to 1.5.2, then it's going to change the version of the package itself according to these rules. If you were to add a new package to the list, it would change it in a different way. And it would update after doing that, this information, similarly for the server, of course. So these are live files, and that's not obvious. I think when you initially read the documentation, if you want to reset everything, just delete all the comments, and that'll set it back. You'll be version 1.0.0.0. And so, yeah, and also in the documentation, it talks about configuration points for the Python service itself. So this would be analogous to a lot of the things you see in TER. Okay. And so you can drill into these. These also can be scripted if you script the installation. Okay. Packages. All right. So let's talk a little bit more. Oh, yes, of course. So there's more about this, about the service inside of the Spotfire Server environment documentation. Let's talk a little bit more about resources. First of all, Nicholas Ambertson has written the main wiki page for the native Python data functions in TICO Spotfire. It includes a 2-minute video by him on it. It links to frequently asked questions, which are here. I would propose that if you have questions, might not be a bad idea to add them as comments to the frequently asked questions page, and then perhaps he would incorporate them into this page itself. And then there's a bit about using packages. We've covered this in great detail here today. There's also we also distribute pip, right? So you can install things, but I think the easiest way now is to install packages through the dialog. Finally, there's a downloadable example, which we can show very briefly, but it's the same kind of example. If you but it allows you to get your hands on it. So I'll open it here. So what I do here, you'll be able to. Oops, excuse me, it moved. You'll be able to do. Exactly in your own session. This example computes net present value for a set of cash flows and also internal rate of return for a set of cash flows. So the project, financial projects, metrics. The first does not use any packages besides those that are distributed, but the second does. So it's the same story. If you don't have SciPy installed, same package, then the first page will run fine. So if you budge the interest rate, you'll see the net present value values updates. But if you try to run the second page by changing the initial outlay for project number 1, it won't run. But if you have SciPy installed or deployed installed, then it will. So this example is downloadable from the community at this link, and I'm sure we can send the links out under separate cover. So what we did today is we talked about the development cycle for Python data functions. We kind of went backwards in a way. We started with the answer, with the results, and we followed it back to a practice that we have inside of a Python client for testing the data function that you will deploy. We talked about deploying to clients and distributing collections of packages. When I see the word environment, I also think of the Python interpreter version itself. So what we've done here is we're just distributing the package collections. I would be interested to see in the future, and that might be a question you'd like to ask and put on the site, whether that will soon allow also to distribute the interpreter along with packages. And so that'd be in the sense of a Python environment. And we've talked about the Python service, how to get access to it. Right? It's a new capability under the node manager. And we talked about how to get information about it through the various points of documentation. There's documentation for Spotfire Analyst. There's documentation for the Python server itself. And there's some information about it in the Spotfire Server and environment security documentation. And we'd be very interested in hearing from you for future Dr. Spotfires, specific kinds of data functions you may be interested in exploring. There's a whole wealth of things. Neil showed us some neat ones in January. Nicholas shows quite an interesting one in that page that we talked about earlier. And there's quite a bit of work ongoing in the data science team on this. So we'd be really happy to hear from you what kinds of neat things you'd like to see shown about data functions itself. Today we focused mostly on the dev cycle and the deployment, following the new features from 10.10.